Awesome. Can you guys all see the screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, good deal. Well, thank you guys for all joining us today. And thank you for attending our session on developing an online brand. My name is Peter Knapp, and I work as Arrowhead Center's Creative Director and work specifically with all of our programs and clients. As you know, Arrowhead Center is made up of a lot of different programs under Arrowhead Center as a whole. And so today we'll be talking about branding. Branding is a passion of mine, and it's been that way for quite some time since I've been in school and since I've graduated. I hope that your takeaway from this presentation is enlightening and also refreshing. So thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to share with you our knowledge and everything that we have that we're able to share in terms of branding. So thank you for coming today. Let me just get my mouse over to my screen here. 1 second. There we go. All right. So we're going to start off with our agenda. In these areas we're going to be talking about today should be areas that you dive into looking for in your own business, whether you're already successful and just need that boost of an online presence or a bit of a brand overhaul. Everyone's going to be in different areas, and we totally understand that. Some of us are small businesses, some of us are startups. These are highly important to keep in mind, especially in these times that we're facing due to COVID-19. So number one, we're going to talk about research and ideation. 2, discovering your brand identity. 3, messaging for your brand. 4, selecting a designer or agency. 5, examples, both good and bad. 6, moving your brand online. And 7, your brand as a whole. And then we'll wrap it up with the value of your brand. So we have a lot to share with you. We hope that you'll find this helpful on your journey to developing your online brand. Next, we have research and ideation. We're going to start with that first. So number one, you want to put in the work. Hard work and patience will pay off when you begin your research and ideation phase. There are some key points you want to make sure that you keep in mind with your brand. This means communicating the same message. You don't want to confuse your audience. You want to make time and take time to have your peers and your friends and families take surveys on your brand. Really important. You know, there's a bunch of market analysis that you can do. And that way you can have an idea of what your current perception of your peers' perception is of your company or your idea. Knowing your budget, really important, right? We don't want to just splurge in one area and then we don't have any money for anything else, right? So identifying the main areas of need for your business and then going from there. Take it step by step. And you want to think about the big picture. As I was getting this presentation ready, I came across this phrase: people don't buy products, they buy better versions of themselves. And so Apple and Pepsi both did this. They were very successful. They did this by not talking about the product, but really about talking about the user. So remember the user here. The Pepsi generation is a really strong example, right? If you're old like me and remember those Pepsi ads, I think Michael Jackson was in those. That was the Pepsi generation. Next, let's talk about some traits of a great brand. So there's this quadrant, or this honeycomb kind of quadrant of all of these great traits that make up a great brand. And there's not really necessarily a hierarchy here. This is just kind of a nice little honeycomb effect we have. So first, let's talk about vision. Vision is by having a compelling vision, you can have an effective, articulate, and passionate leader is the foundation and the inspiration for the best brands. You want to make sure you've got a very clear vision of what your brand is going to do. Next, we'll talk about the meaning. meaning is the best brands stand for something, a big idea, a strategic position, a defined set of values, and a voice that stands apart. Authenticity is not possible with an organization having clarity, or without an organization having clarity about its market, positioning and value proposition and competitive difference. You also want to make sure that you have good differentiation here. Brands always compete with each other, oftentimes within their own business category. And at some level, they compete with all brands, and they all want our attention and our loyalty and our money, right? Sustainability. Sustainability is the ability to have longevity in an environment in constant flux. Think of where we are now, right? We are definitely pivoting in multiple directions right now due to our current situation. And this can be characterized by future permutations that no one can predict, such as times like this. Coherence. Whenever a customer experiences a brand, it must feel similar and familiar and have the desired effect. Consistency does not need to be rigid or limiting in order to feel like one company. So very important, you make sure you don't limit yourselves. Make sure you have that vision, but you don't, you're not just so strict on yourself where you can't expand. Flexibility. An effective brand identity positions a company for change and growth in the future. It supports an evolving marketing strategy. Next, we have commitment. Organizations need to actively manage their assets, including the brand name, the trademarks, the integrated sales and marketing systems, and the standards. Then we have value. Building awareness, increasing recognition, communicating uniqueness and quality, and expressing a competitive difference create measuring results. And this takes us to our next slide, knowing thyself, right? As you get an idea of who you are as a brand, you'll be able to know thyself or know yourself. This pyramid illustrates the organizations cannot support the identity process without understanding what they stand for. Companies with this self-knowledge start the process of strength and create solutions that are suitable. The diagram helps us to have an identity of, number one, who we are, knowing who we are. Number two, core messaging. Three, target messages. And four, look and feel. And then your logo is on top. We always want to start with a strong base in branding. It's very, very important to do that. And having all these different functions of your brand, you can kind of equate that to a tree with very strong roots, right? If we don't have strong roots, what happens to the tree? It falls, it dies, and that's what we don't want for your brand. As a brand, we need to be able to have a strong foundation. If you take away any of these pieces of the pyramid, it just doesn't work, right? We have empty gaps and it's incomplete, and you have missing pieces in your brand's identity. So let's talk about discovering your brand identity and how this is very important in knowing your brand. Consider the following when thinking about your core brand identity. How can you discover your brand identity? Knowing your audience is key to speaking and selling to them. There should be something that is of need for them to gain interest in your brand. Consider Sony or Apple. Both are very professional brands that have various target audiences and demographics. And you definitely want to learn about your competition. What do they do right? What do they do wrong? What would you do to improve that brand? So if you can start thinking, from the outside rather than just solely focused on the inside, your brand will just get that much stronger. So make sure you know your audience, make sure you know who your competition is, and do some studying. Study some really successful brands that will help you out so much. And we'll take it from here into moving into successful brand traits. So if you think about some of the strong, successful brands you see on a regular basis, they have strong traits in their brand and in their mark and in their design. These traits include, but are not limited to, research time and effort, color theory and study, and a strong and legible mark. And we'll be kind of discussing all of these different traits today. Let's move on to messaging for your brand identity. Mission statements and slogans such as Coke, right? Refresh the world, make a difference. And Coke has really pivoted throughout the years in their overall branding. Their logo has stayed very, very nice and strong, but they've found a very real way to connect with people and make the most of moments in life. It has a very genuine brand and feel, and you can notice how they use photography in their brand, right? It's very, you're in the moment, it's real, right? Hence the messaging, Coke, it's the real thing, taste the feeling, open happiness. These are all playing off of our emotions that we typically have as human beings. Pepsi rolled out a new campaign in 2020. Kind of a crazy time to roll it out, but why not? They're using statistics from Pepsi drinkers that use playful facts. For instance, Pepsi creates more smiles with every sip and every bite. So Pepsi's not only just limited to, they don't limit themselves to drinks or to beverages, right? They also own food companies as well. So that's where that whole slogan comes in. So take a look at Pepsi has used the bottle shape very much like Coca-Cola. It's kind of an evolution of their bottle, and it's been revolutionized as well. The imagery has been a staple of their competition for many years, right? Pepsi is kind of the new thing. Even their logo, their symbols, their typography that they use is very fresh. It's very new. And you'll notice that throughout the years, though, and we'll take a look at this as we go through our brands, but Pepsi has kind of reinvented themselves, and that's not a bad thing to do. They've done it pretty frequently. So we'll take a look at that in a few slides down. So you've done the research. Now you have some great ideas. Where can you take your brand? And let's put that messaging from your research to good use. So what is the story behind your brand? And you want to become a really good storyteller. You want to connect with your audience through various platforms. You know, at first everybody was kind of standoffish with social media. You know, I remember when it first started off, and then it just blew up, right? So now we have platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. And we'll talk more about this, about the social media aspect in our social media webinar that we're going to be having in a couple weeks. Urgency plus emotional connection equals a dollar conversion. So social media is a great way to communicate effectively. If you notice these brands, and especially in these times, so many of us are on our phone. It's really hard not to notice these companies and their messaging. You can relate to all the messaging here, and that these brands, what they do to connect to the world. Take a look at Nike, take a look at Target, Southwest Creative, and that's actually a local brand. Southwest Creative is here in the Las Cruces region, and they've just done a really nice job with their Instagram posts. And I wanted to put good examples that I felt were strong for everybody to see here. And these are all social media or Instagram examples. They use elements to really unify the customer and to bring a message that really brings everyone together. And we all can kind of relate to this. I don't know how many of you guys check your phones, but I get these weekly reports that tell me how much usage my phone is using and what I'm on. Am I on the internet? What browser I'm using the most of, and my internet usage has been through the roof probably the last 60 days. I have kids, and sometimes my kids snag my phone, and so the usage just goes up from there. But these brands really, they pick up on that, and they know their target audience. So I don't know if you guys have ever, been looking on something, on some website, and you're looking at shoes, for example, and then all of a sudden in your social media feed, you get some Nike ads that pop up, and you're like, well, that's weird. How did they do that? So They have ways to track you and all that stuff, so they can get some really good information and really target in on what your likes are. This is a really good lead into our next section on color and branding. So as we think about different color combinations that you're interested in on this color wheel, let's take a look and see how they work with your brand. Colors often evoke strong emotions, right? Primary colors, for example, they cannot be made by mixing other colors together. Usually these colors are way too strong to use by themselves within your illustration. Secondary colors are used by mixing your primary colors together. Example, yellow and blue makes green. Tertiary colors are formed by mixing two secondary colors. For example, combining orange and violet make a very nice like brick color. And next we have complementary colors. And these are colors that are usually opposite each other on the color wheel, right? So if we look at, you know, the green, we have a nice red, hence the whole Christmas theme. If you look at our seasonal colors, oftentimes you can kind of track those through this color wheel. These colors neutralize each other when mixed together. When a small amount of one color is mixed with its complement, the result is a less intense, softer version of that color. Analogous colors, these are pretty cool and different. These are colors that are adjacent or next to each other on the color wheel. And when they are used together, they create a harmony and balance. One color is usually dominant or used more than the other in the illustration. So let's take a look at some examples seen here in this slide. All of these really nice examples will use really strong primary or secondary colors. Target has a red mark and is has that bullseye, which says, hey, you don't want to miss this. It's important to come into our store, and we show that we're on point with our sales. Target, much like Nike, which we'll get into later, has also kind of dropped the whole, the wording that says Target, and now it's just that bullseye, and they can easily kind of pivot between the two if they want to do that. Ford uses blues, very, very calm colors, often portraying technology. It's very calming. Fanta, Nickelodeon, and Crush, and they all use orange, right? Very, very kid-friendly colors, and they play to that fun-natured, kid-friendly, sweet side of things. Girl Scouts, John Deere, TD Ameritrade, Whole Foods all use variations of green to evoke different emotions when viewed. Green can also be seen as kind of a nice peaceful color that can also mean money and various things there. And it also kind of gives us a familiarity and a peace of mind. Chanel and BBC, those are big, bold logos. I think I missed McDonald's. Let's go to that real quick. McDonald's uses those golden arches, right? So when we were kids and we were in the car with our parents or relatives or family, and we're traveling and we see those golden arches pop up, we're like, oh, that's some. I have a familiar thing that I see, and I'm hungry, and all these different thoughts kind of pop into your head. So a mark and colors can really bring out all kinds of emotions and make you do things that hey, I didn't know I was hungry right now. Now I'm hungry and I want to eat. And moving back to Chanel and BBC, they use black in their logos. They're saying, hey, we're straight to the point. There's no need for anything else to be said here. Buy our product. That's it. We can see that many primary colors are used in branding. It's important to select the right color for your company's branding and think about how colors will print in black and white. They can be seen in all kinds of different color formats, but when you have your mark, it's always good to see it in black and white first to make sure it's going to work. You'll see with these logos, and I think these are really successful logos, there's not a whole lot of gradation or shading that's going on aside from Ford. Ford kind of, they push the envelope a little bit there with their mark, but typically they're solid colors. And you'll even see in the commercials, Ford will just have, sometimes it's the words only. So think about that when you're putting together your mark and your identity. So if we notice the placement here of the cereal boxes on the bottom versus the placement is out of sight for children if it would be on the very, very top, right? So if you have kids or have ever, if you remember being a kid, right? The really good stuff, and I like to call it the good stuff, is it's always on the bottom of the shelf. And sometimes I still look there as we go grocery shopping when we get out to do that. And that's where I know the good sugary cereals are going to be, right? Probably not good for you, but hey, they know their audience. And they also know that if you have little children that are with you that go to the grocery store, they're going to be looking at all these cereal boxes, and they're going to pick those. You know, we see the blue Frosted Flakes. That's a primary color. Lucky Charms also uses red. So we think about the way the colors are used in their branding. These cereal boxes are at eye level for their audience, right? Which is children. And if you've ever been to a grocery store and have heard a screaming child in the grocery store, you know, for a parent, that's not the funnest thing. And then we have, sometimes it's just grab that cereal box and give it to them, and then they're happy, right, for the rest of the time, or maybe for 5 minutes. So you got to get your shopping done quick. These companies really know their target audience, and you can tell that they've done their research. It's really, they're very meticulous about things, and we can really learn a lot from these companies like this, and we can have the same approach to our businesses. This brings us to our next slide here, which is selecting a designer or agency. You want to make sure, and I would say you don't need to go to California or to Colorado or to, you know, outside of New Mexico, if most of you guys are all joining from New Mexico. If there's a few that are joining from out of state, I would suggest that you stay within your state or your region, your city, and do some research on some really great agencies or graphic designers. You know, Las Cruces has probably a good amount to choose from. I can think of 4 or 5 strong ones right off the bat, and there's tons of great freelancers or designers, especially right now, that are graduating or have graduated, that have some experience and that could really use the work, and they're really great and they're gifted. So you want to think about what makes an impression for your company. You want to really ask yourselves these things, like identifying things you like about about their designs, right? So look at their portfolio, look at their website, look at their past client work. Ask yourself if you too would be a great fit. You know, knowing their style and seeing how they communicate with you, really, and you'll know right off the bat from your you know, from a little interview with them, and just by talking to them, if you're going to be a fit. If not, that's okay. Hey, you know, you know, by at least you had a conversation about it. Once you know if the agency or designer is a good fit for you, set up a consultation to review your design needs. So back in the day when we could meet and stuff, I used to meet my clients at either like a local coffee place, or, you know, some kind of area where we could meet together. Usually public place is the best thing to do. And you can talk freely, you know, and it just kind of loosens up the mood, and you're able to really hone in on what the customer wants. And that's what your designer or your creative will do with you. Think about this phrase. The client is the author, the creatives are the interpreters. And so as creatives, and I'll speak on behalf of myself because I am a creative, my whole goal is to kind of, we're solving a puzzle for you. We want to make sure that we can have this puzzle fit together and that it makes sense, and your whole brand really just has a strong foundation behind everything, and that you're successful, because that makes us happy to see that you are successful. That is a primary goal for all of us. And so let us help you in your goals and what you want to do. And since you are the author, you know your brand, we can kind of put all the pieces together. We're going to move on to creating your logo. Your designer or agency should be able to talk to you or should begin by talking to you about creating the logo. If you have a need for this, if not, and you already have a logo and it's strong, that's great. You might need other areas that need work. Maybe it's promotional or it's some marketing needs. But let's check the criteria below. This is a great conversation to have as you begin to explore areas that you both can begin building a strong brand together. So areas your designer will think about when creating your logo or mark are a strong, balanced mark, simple functionality, memorable, flexible, appropriate colors, timeless, unique, and strong typography. These are all great traits of a strong mark or logo. We can find some really bad logos out there. We won't go into the bad ones. I just kind of want to show you the good ones that I personally just like a lot. And we study these in school as well. So here's some great examples. These are great examples of functionality and form. So FedEx, the FedEx logo demonstrates nice composition and a clever twist on the arrow being placed within the E and the X. And if you do a little research, you'll see how everything kind of came together with FedEx, but it's a cool story. It's strong and it's balanced. Apple shows the importance of simple in functionality and the use of the apple and the bite mark. Nike was able to convert a swoosh or convert over to a swoosh and really have its memorable mark as one of the most recognizable marks that we know today. We all kind of remember how Nike got started. It had the kind of italicized or slanted typeface above the Nike swoosh. And, that was already a nice mark. And then they just got rid of it. And everybody was like, oh, that's interesting. I remember I was a 7th grader, maybe 6th grader at the time when I saw that. And I was like, wow, that's a really gutsy thing to do. But it worked, and it's worked ever since. LinkedIn is also very flexible. It's inviting, and it gives you a sense of hope and opportunity that can be seen in the brand, right? Here we have that blue, that calming sense that we see within that box on the LinkedIn. Coca-Cola has withstood the test of time. This is the original mark. It's very anti-aging, and it's still visible with its current brand today. And you'll notice I don't have Pepsi on there. Pepsi has reinvented themselves so many times. I felt like let's just focus on the very strong brands that have just kind of stayed focused and not really changed so much. And no knock on Pepsi, because they do great things. Let's see, Amazon is great as well. They have their little smiley face right underneath the MAZ, right? We almost kind of see a face there. It's that sensation we feel when we receive a product in the mail or at our doorstep, as what's going on now. We'll have that sense of, oh, what's in the box? What did we get? And maybe it's something for your kids, and just seeing the joy on their face. So we have that emotion that this logo evicts, and it's not overcomplicated. It's simple and it's clean, and it's also unique. We have Vine, which is a great example of color and fluidity. The green is really easy on the eyes, and it almost leaves you wondering what's next, right? We have that continuation from the V to the I to the N to the E. And these videos just keep going, right? Invisio, this is a logo that I thought was really strong. They're not afraid to use strong typography, but also use abstract shapes that kind of play off of that strong typography, and really merging the two together. We can see that all these brands are easily identifiable, and there aren't a million elements being pushed into the logo with graphics all over the place. The easier to read, the more memorable. And here's some food for thought. The average customer's attention span is roughly 8 seconds. So you have to make your brand count. Don't overthink it, and let your graphic designer or agency do that for you. So we'll move on to moving your brand online. Number one, you want to start with a strong website. Ask your web designer to place in analytics and brainstorm with them on how they can build out your social media presence. It's important to track how you're being found so that you can work with your designer or agency to come up with the best solution that works for you. So if you also will probably need to reallocate funds as needed. You may see that, you know, whatever your designer or the agency offers you is maybe there's some things that are over budget, or maybe you can cut here. So you're going to have to be pretty think methodically about this. Once you can identify your major areas of need, then it will be so much easier to move forward. Remember to do things in steps. Don't try and do it all at once. What is your biggest area of need? Communicate your budget to your designer or agency so both of you can come up with a plan that works best for you. I can tell you at Arrowhead Center, we've done that. Whenever we've outsourced with local agencies, we'll let them know what our budget is, and then they'll let us know what they can do, and then we come to an agreement, right? So neither one feels like they're bending too much over, you know, bending over backwards for them, or, you know, stretching the budget too far, or no one's getting, you know, paid what they need to be paid. So we want to make sure that we do those things so everybody wins here. So here we can see some website examples of what to avoid. This first one is what not to do. Can you all see that? So this is the Yale School of Art. And not knocking Yale, but this is kind of gross. We don't know where to really look. We have all these crazy images of COVID-19 behind it. It's not pretty. It's not fun. There's a better way they can probably tackle this. Up next, we have the Paradise, right? The Healthy Paradise water. And this is not the best looking site either. You know, we have water delivery being kind of all over the place. There's a million different links. So when you have time, we will make this presentation shareable, so you'll be able to actually see this. Our next slide here is the Patamex. And when you actually click on that link, it will take you to just a very random website, and links are broken. It's pretty bad. You know, it just doesn't look very good at all, and we don't really know where it's hosted. So these are things to avoid. They also may not even have SEO optimization either, and that's also something, especially nowadays, which you really want to make sure that you are keeping in mind to have in your website. So we have some really nice user-friendly websites. We have Tempo. They're all about getting hired and starting to hire. We have Microsoft. If you explore these websites, they look really, really good. You know, we can also move on to Nike and the iMac Pro. Both of those, and I'd encourage you guys to explore these. They both have really, really nice product photography. I don't know if everyone has an Apple product here or has owned a pair of Nikes, but that product photography just helps so much. And I would definitely recommend buying their products. They're great products, but their navigation on these websites are key. If you click on the iMac Pro website, you have to scroll quite a bit. But all of the scrolling that's done is because these are all the great features. So knowing when to have scrolling, you know, extensive scrolling, and when to just keep your website just to minimal scrolling is also something that you'll need to know. Justin will be talking more about that as well, but I just thought that it was very, very important to mention that to you. So your brand as a whole, where are we as a whole here? And how does your brand develop? Ideally, you want to think about your brand as a whole. How can your brand expand to a wider audience? What are some of those outlets you can use to promote your online brand? How does your brand come together in all functions? So these are great examples of what the Beats by Dre or the Power Beats Pro series has done. They have excellent product photography. They have very, very nice packaging. It's simple, it's clean. You can actually see Apple's influence on all this, which I think made the pair such a great merger when they did merge. And you also have the nice website when you look at their website. So think about professional photography, their website, their social media outlets, and their packaging. All of these are really great bullet points to note and to make sure that your brand is following. One thing that we learned at a conference back in 2014, and this is maybe what, 6 years ago almost, was that how effective your brand can be using eco-friendly packaging. And they used Amazon countless times of how you're more concerned about now what's in the box, and having nice package design is great. It really is. But really thinking as a whole, you have to think about cost effectiveness, and we're also trying to be environmentally friendly too. So if you can find some eco-friendly packaging that's not too pricey, because sometimes it's very, very pricey to do eco-friendly packaging, then that's great. And your designer can really help you explore those options. Last, I'd like to give you or leave you with a slide with the value of your brand. It really is an investment. There's some really nice stats here that I was able to find, and Pepsi reportedly spent $1 million on their logo redesign in 2008. In London, the London 2012 Olympics was $625,000 for their brand identity. BBC, right, that black mark that we saw, $1.8 million. BP, we all know they had the big, the mess to clean up. They had to kind of reevaluate their brand and clean up their brand, and they spent $211 million. So you can see the resources there if you'd like to go and check on that. It's easy, very, very easy to overlook a logo, but a logo is so much more than just a simple mark. A logo speaks to our audience on multiple levels and is an identifier of your brand. Your customers should not forget your logo. These logos and brand identities have been purchased by high-paying customers, and they really know the importance of their brand and identity. But just like these high-paying customers, our small businesses, our startups are just as important, right? We all want to be able to expand and eventually gain greater financial assets and really build the brand up, just like these core brands have done. And you probably can't afford a $1 million logo. I know I can't afford a $1 million logo either. But it's highly important that you do think of your logo, your brand identity as an investment, and all of the different components that go into that. So keep in mind that your brand is of high value and it's an investment. It's not just a logo. The more of these great, these great categories that your logo can fall into, the less likely that you're going to have to reinvent your brand as a whole. So up next, starting next Friday, Justin Santiago, who is Arrowhead Center's Web Development Director, will host the next 2 seminars in our series, which include information on launching your website and social media marketing. He'll be introducing launching your website next Friday. The third webinar is all about launching your website using the branding feel that you developed in the previous webinar, and participants will learn how to plan the look and feel the flow of your website. So you'll get started with more technical aspects, launching your website, and he'll help you kind of identify the areas that you really need to start with before you can just kind of go into the whole big picture of everything. He'll talk about setting up an e-commerce store and SEO and picking providers and all that good stuff for your hosting on your website as well. And then on May 29th, he'll cover social media, and that's the 4th webinar, and that will be all about social media and we'll discuss different platforms and their demographics and their uses for social media, types of content for your business, and how often to post, what not to post. And he'll walk you through the setup of a Facebook business page. So Justin's great. I think you'll learn a lot from him. And thank you guys for having me. And I wanted to just ask you if there's any questions at all today. If you do have any questions, please feel free to let me know. And we'll turn the time over to everyone to ask questions.
Hi, Pete. This is Isabella. Hi, everyone. I'm part of the Arrowhead team as well. While everyone is working on sending questions, you can send them via chat to the host, and we'll start to answer them. So while everybody's submitting any questions you have for Pete, Pete, I just have a general question that sometimes people have asked before, which is how many creatives or designers or marketing agencies should businesses talk to before making a decision about who to go with?
You know, I guess it's I don't have a solid number there. I mean, I'd say maybe talk to 3 of them and see kind of who you feel would be best. You may find that the very first one you talk to just nails everything for you, and they just provide all the answers that you're looking for. It's not a bad idea just to reach out to multiple. I know there's a few great ones here in town, NMCO, Southwest Creative, Palomora, and then there's some amazing freelancers in this town as well. And we've luckily had the opportunity to work with a good chunk of them here. And so they've all done great work. So I don't know if there's a number that's just, that's it. This is the number that you want to make sure you use. But I think once you find that fit, you'll really know if it's going to work. And I think communication is key. So one thing, you know, I think we always talk about in our meetings at Arrowhead Center is just, I mean, we'll ask questions. If we don't understand something, we'll ask, and no question is a bad question. When we work with clients, we will make sure that we ask plenty of questions, because I think it's better to be prepared than not be prepared. And that's what really your designers should be doing, or your freelance designers or agencies should be asking you questions. In order to have the solution, they have to ask those questions. I hope that kind of helped there.
Yeah, thanks, Pete.
Sure.
Everybody, you should be able to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. Oh, Tamara?
Yeah, I typed it in the chat. It went privately to you, Peter, but I'll just read it.
Sure.
So if I've had a logo for several years, like one of those $5 off the Fiverr thing, but it's, you know, I've used it. So my question, the way I typed it, if we've used a logo for several years, but are moving more online, are there pros and cons to keeping the same versus creating a new one, especially if the first one wasn't given proper thought in the first place?
You know, I guess if you're comfortable with the logo and you like it, and it really identifies your brand as a whole, then I think you're okay there. But if you're thinking like, I don't know, this really doesn't describe who I am as a customer, and does it really communicate what we do to our audience? And I think that there's a way to do it, especially if I think it was Colgate or Crest. They rebranded themselves probably, I don't know, 30 years ago or so, or maybe 20 something years ago. And they did it in a way where they still kind of kept their old look so that their customers could still identify them with some of those traits that they had before in the logo. So that might be something you keep in mind. And we're definitely happy to review anything as well. So if you want to send anything my way.
Can I show it to you? Because if I change my virtual background and put it on my camera, I'm not sure if it's going to come up backwards or not. Okay, I changed my virtual background. Wait a minute. Start video. There it is.
Okay.
Like that?
Well, that's
It's
cool.
just-
Is
it's
it kind of
just-
like a heart?
Well, it's a dog shaped like a heart, yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I didn't give it any thought. I just sent that. Is it okay? I mean, if it's going more online, that doesn't really convey that or anything.
Yeah, I mean, well, your logo should be, you're good. You can actually, you can set up. Your logo really should be able to be used online. And it doesn't, you may even have maybe some kind of a statement underneath your company name that says, hey, now we're online, or something like that.
Right.
Maybe you change your mission statement. Sometimes it's not about, reinventing the wheel. And I think it's clever. You could see what a designer may do differently to it, and you could tell them like, hey, what you like about it, what you don't like about it. And sometimes those consultations, a lot of them are free. They'll meet with you and then just discuss what the options may be for yourself.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So just kind of morph it's what you're saying, maybe change it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And if you feel that it needs it, because like that statement says, you're the author, we are the interpreters. So if you're feeling like, hey, I need a brand overhaul, or if you show it, I might even show it to a few people, maybe show it to a couple of your close family or friends. You could even do a survey if you wanted to. But I think it's important not to keep too many chefs in the kitchen, if you know what I'm saying, because then you'll get feedback in multiple directions, and then you may come out of this thing really confused, and we don't want that. But yeah, I would definitely maybe share it with a couple people and just say, hey.
Well, I mean, everybody's seen it at this point. I've been using it for years, but as far as changing it, is that what you mean? Show them a new one?
Yeah, you could, or I mean, something you could do, you could play around with the typography. You could reach out to, and I will say there's a lot of graduating designers that are coming from NMSU that are probably in need of freelance work that could use this as a project for them.
All right, I'll get some names from Isabella at some point then. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Bye-bye.
Also, Tamara, I just wanted to chime in really quickly. This goes for everybody. There's some really great branding quizzes that you could take online that will help you maybe identify a general sense for the direction that you're interested in or that you like. And that might help your designer. So if you go talk to a designer, that you took this quiz, and they can look at it and get some insight and help you communicate sort of what direction you find most interesting.
Okay.
Right.
So if I Google, if everybody in here just Googles branding quizzes, we'll find some hits.
Yeah, and especially like specifically for logos, certainly there's a lot of like free logo quizzes.
Logo quizzes.
You just type into Google and find.
Okay.
And we'll try to maybe in the next couple weeks add some links to our resources page on the Arrowhead website, so that you guys can find those too if you're having trouble searching for them on your own.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys.
Sure.
Sure.
I saw Sergio had a question, and Tamara as well.
Yeah, I do actually. So, I mean, this is going to be a general question, but, regarding a website, what amount should we be kind of like, looking or expecting to pay? I know it can range, you know what I mean? Like, just depending on who we hire. But say, for example, if we go to a freelancer who's got, okay experience, good experience and stuff, just to get things going with a website, what amount range should we expect to be paying, for that type of service?
I think, and I'll ask Justin to jump in here too. But I think a lot of that has to do with how complex your web page is. It's really going to vary from, like
in my sorry to interrupt. In my case, what I'm looking at is just to create leads. So not necessarily like, so much interactive. It's just basically, basic information and a couple of links here and there, but mostly just to create leads,
Right. Yeah. And And I think a lot of that depends on whether you're a startup or are you a small business. Prices kind of vary for that, but Justin, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, like you said, price can vary, and it also even if you might have a simple or a simple website in your mind, but there's actually a lot of complicated things that go into the back, especially if your whole aspect is to create leads. Then you're probably going to do a lot of SEO work on that website, and that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So as far as pricing goes, it depends if you go through an agency or a freelancer, because for agencies are going to cost they have, standardized prices depending on the agency. So I could say for like a one-page website, with like a very, minimal information, I'd say anywhere between 500 to maybe 1,000. Because you also have to think of the aspect too, where yes, you might not think it's a lot of work to do, but you're asking them to help you make money, and that also kind of goes into the aspect of the price, kind of what Peter's saying, like the value of your logo. How they were saying they paid millions of dollars. These big companies paid millions of dollars just for the logo. It's like, oh well, that's just, you can say, one argument is that, well, that's just a drawing though. It's like, yeah, but it's worth millions of dollars. Same thing for a website. It might be one single page website, but it might be worth, thousands of dollars. So there's really no set price on that. It also kind of depends on your location and all this other stuff. There's too many variables.
Right.
Can I also add to that, Justin? So to add to what Justin is saying, like he said, there's different components that go into a website. So as you talk to a web developer, you might ask, how much for just the landing page, and then how much for SEO, and try to break down by components so you can get a fair cost estimate before you start to engage. You want to look at the portfolio that your web designer has, so that you can see the level of work and quality, because you might have somebody that's charging you really low, right? But then you look at some of the websites they've developed and they don't function well, or they don't look very nice. So you want to look at their portfolio. You want to look at their cost estimates and ask for a breakdown, because they will if you ask for it.
Yeah.
And then you want to look at their experience too, because obviously somebody that's been developing websites for a really long time and stays up to date will probably charge you more than someone that maybe just graduated, is still working out the kinks. And maybe it's okay to hire someone that just graduated if you're looking for a very sort of basic thing. But these are all sort of some of the things you should look at as you're engaging with different potential contractors that you're going to work with.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, Isabel, is if you are going to hire someone right out of school that needs the experience, keep in mind that you'll need to be flexible with them, as it can be a great project for them, but definitely making sure that they're compensated, that they're financially compensated for it, as they're learning too. We always encourage, and I teach a part-time within MSU or DACC, the community college here, and I always encourage our students to make sure that they have that work while they're in school, so that way when they're out of school, they're able to be compensated correctly, and so they're not working for peanuts, I guess is what I'm saying. And I'm not saying anybody's gonna give them $50 for a website, which is very, very, very low. But if you're in that boat of like, hey, you know what, I'm kind of just trying to figure things out. Let me see what like a new designer can do for me, and it may just be a perfect fit. And who knows, your company may explode and get huge, and then that designer, you can start increasing, and they probably will increase their rates as well as you expand, or as you grow more financially sound.
One more aspect on to the pricing. I think those are all great points. But there's another factor involved in pricing is if they are hand coding a website versus using a builder such as WordPress or Wix, Squarespace, whatever. If somebody's going to be hand coding something from scratch, if you have like very complex needs, that's going to be a lot more expensive than a CMS or a content management system.
Yep. Yep, I agree with that. I see a question that popped up from Kristen, and she's asking, where do we put together a survey that will get the most responses? You could do this a number of ways. You could do SurveyMonkey. You could do, I believe MailChimp also has surveys. You could send that out. You can also blast it out through a Google form, put it up on social media, and just copy and paste the link there, and you can get that. Justin and Isabella, I'd like to ask if there are any other areas that you would recommend for getting a survey up so they can get some responses on their logos or their branding.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have a customer base, certainly putting together like an email, a link in an email to a survey would be a really efficient way to get some feedback. Some social media platforms have poll functions in them already built in. So I would use those for like very simple kind of polling. But certainly try to use the resources that you have with who you're talking to. So if you have a customer list that you can send out questions about your branding, I think that's a totally great way to get some feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. I think social media, especially if you have a fair amount of following, is like Isabella said, is a great way for simple feedback. And the emails is a good way. As far as like when I've done surveys and things, I always like Google Forms just because it's free. You know, all you need is a Google account, and then it automatically exports that data into an Excel sheet or a Google Doc sheet, so you can look at the data in a clean format.
Yeah. Thank you both for those comments. Hopefully that answered your question, Kristen. Cool. There's a question from Renata. Do you use any framework for displaying your final logo and components, as well as what to do and what not to do? So as far as that goes, I don't know if Renata's still on the line. Looks like
She is.
Okay, great. So are you asking like, what does that look like for the client? Like when the artist or the creative shows the work, or?
Yes, like, well, I'm a designer, but I'm wondering, like, how do you come up with these guidelines, and how do you put them out there for internal use and as well as for external use?
Yeah, typically what I'll do, I haven't really showed the clients of what not to do. Personally, what I've done and what we practice at Arrowhead Center, we will show clients, and these are our own Arrowhead Center clients, past work that we've done, and so they get an idea of what we can do. But I feel sometimes if you show the client what not to do, it can get stuck in their head and they may just still pick it. That's happened in previous positions I've held. But I think really communicating what that logo could be and really talking them through, finding some information out about them, what is it that they're after for their brand, and then you can kind of just start brainstorming with them, because I think the client, your customer's not going to know everything all at once, right? And they'll probably just get some inspiration throughout the day, or it could be throughout the weeks, and they're just kind of ping-ponging back and forth with you some ideas, and then really showing your work, I think, is the best thing that you can do. if they're really, it doesn't help or it doesn't hurt to show them some bad examples. And there's some very cheap, like quick logo creation companies out there. But the problem with those, and you may get some quality work out of them, but the problem with those, and those may be good to show your client, because they will use that same logo across the board and with a million other companies that are, or maybe not so much companies, but a million other clients that are just paying just hardly anything for the logo. So, and it's not a fault of the customer. You know, we're all learning, but I think originality, if you want that, it's really good to look within your local communities, because you're going to get that versus kind of a mass produced logo farm, if that makes sense. So really differentiating yourself from those big mass produced places would be really helpful, I think.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Wow, we actually went a minute over. Sorry about that, guys. Awesome.
Thanks so much, Pete.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And thank you, Isabella and Justin, for your comments, and for everybody for asking questions. I really enjoyed being here. It was great. Made my Friday nice and smooth. So now I've been productive this morning. It's been great.
Just a quick housekeeping item for everybody. We're going to be posting any of these questions that we talked about today on the Arrowhead website. Pete had mentioned during his presentation that you can register for the next webinar. So after this session, we're going to send out an email to all of you that registered through the account, and add a link to register for the next webinar session, and also to the Arrowhead page where you can find additional information for the entire webinar series. So please keep an eye out for that email, because there's some great resources that we're hoping to provide. Yes, and feel free to email me as well. If you have any other additional questions, I'm happy to answer them and discuss further.
I don't think we know your email, Peter.
Oh, let me, it should be on that slide, but what we'll go ahead and do, we'll share that slide with everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and share this with Param, and she'll share it with you all. So it's pknapp@nmsu.edu. So that's available in the chat. Yep. And then when we share our presentation, it's going to be on the last slide as well. So if you need to get in contact with me, feel free to do that. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining. I think this concludes our webinar. Yep, thank you.